I am your host, Brandon Scoopy Robinson, joined by Forbes own Brian Mazique. Brother, what's going on?
What's going on, man? How you feel today?
I'm maintaining. How you?
Hey, I'm doing the best that I can.
That's it. And as Anita Baker would say, you giving it the best that you got.
Yeah, my wife just actually made that analogy like a couple of days ago.
There you go. And I'm in good company when we both making those references. Say no more. Say no more. Tell me something. Video games and wrestling are some of your day-to-day things that you are around. And I want to start with video games because the 90s put out some games that I really enjoyed. When you look at NBA Jam and the fanfare that it got early on, what were your earliest recollections of that game? How much have you learned about it since?
You know, it's crazy. I never was a fan of that game. And it's the crazy part about that is because I've always been like a more hardcore sports fan. So I always wanted the most realistic game out. And so for me, the moment I saw the game and the guys and the player models weren't realistic and there's only 2v2 and the net's going on fire, like the crazy ultra sports fan in me, that immediately created a disconnect, right? But later on, I got more of an appreciation for a wider scale or a wider look at gaming. And I was like, okay, not everybody in the world is this hardcore sports fan like me. And there's some people that want a lighter experience in sports, and this is like a perfect little entry point for them. So I went back and I played a little bit of NBA Jam. It's still not necessarily my basketball cup of tea when it comes to video games, but I have more of a respect for it now than I did originally.
So you go back and you play it on one system?
No, they released another one. I think it was like a tournament edition or something like that. It wasn't that long ago. It was a little while ago. So I played it again and I was like, I kind of see. And then there was a game, 2K Playgrounds game, and that came out. It was pretty much the same thing, just trying to recapture that old nostalgic kind of a charm. So I still take the realistic ones, the more realistic ones over that though.
For me, I liked when NBA Jam remixed the game and they made NBA Hang Time.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I'm not mistaken, you could play the 3-on-3.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you had Rodman on the Bulls with the hair, and it was green.
Yeah.
Still no Michael though.
Huh? No Michael. You know, that was guard 99. You know, or you don't get him at all. It was like Rodman, Pippen, and somebody else. I can't remember.
Cool coach.
Yeah, cool coach. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So and just like with Barkley not being in games, that whole nine. That's just. I'm not mad at those dudes, man. I'm like, hey, your likeness is your likeness. You only gonna have one of them. Whatever price tag you want to put on it is yours. If somebody wants it bad enough, they're gonna pay whatever you say is needed to be paid to get it. So,
of course, tell me something. In today's world of social media, where would Shawn Michaels in his prime fit?
I think Shawn Michaels would be just as big of a star, if not probably a bigger star today. Social media would make pretty much every magnetic performer that there has ever been in any walk of entertainment. Social media would make each and every one of those men and women bigger stars today. Some of them might get in more trouble because of social media. Mm-hmm. But if we're talking about just their talent, yeah, Shawn Michaels is the greatest little man in the history of professional wrestling. When you say little man, you're talking about somebody under 6'2", generally under 200 pounds. That's a little man in professional wrestling. And as far as people that fit into that like physical profile, I think he's the greatest little man ever.
Yeah, I think you're right. NBA Live 2003 was one of my favorite games because it came with the soundtrack, the CD. J. Kidd was on the cover. Michael Jordan was on the game as a member of the Bulls. And I felt like that was a turning point for NBA Live games. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that particular game and what stood out to you at that time?
I loosely remember that game, but I was a hardcore NBA 2K guy ever since September 9th, 1999, which is when the 2K franchise dropped on Dreamcast.
Hmm.
So from that point, I saw the graphics for 2K and I was like, and I've always been one of those dudes, I can't play more than one sports game. So if I'm picking Madden, I don't care what other football game comes out. Whichever one I deem to be the best, I got to play that one. Same thing with baseball, same thing with basketball. So at that time, I played a lot more 2K, but I did dig the fact, and I think EA kind of really kicked off something with this, with how important they made the soundtracks to the games. I remember not even just live, there was a game, Fight Night Round 3 and Fight Night Champion, that came out, boxing games. And I remember knowing like almost every one of those songs by heart. And some of them was like some bangers. I mean, I think like Jada Kiss is on one. It was some dope songs. So I think for, if nothing else, having the soundtrack become a major part of the overall presentation, I think that's a big deal.
You talked about 2K and the first one coming out. I didn't get hip to 2K until 2K1.
Mm.
Iverson, of course, was still on the cover, but you also saw soundtracks began to take shape even on the 2K sports games as well. Not you had the fire intro, but the consistent playlist was something that EA was progressive in. But you talked about the Sega Dreamcast, and I felt like that game that system was so far ahead of its time, but it was easy to be replicated because of the type of CDs that they put the games on. That was frustrating. What were your earliest, as a gamer yourself and a guy who's around gaming, what were your earliest recollections about Sega Dreamcast just as a system? Where did they make the mark? Where were they ahead of the curve? Where did they miss the mark?
I still think it's still my favorite system of all time. There's a lot of with gaming, nostalgia is always a part of it. How you got it, how you experienced it always plays a role. So for me, the game came out literally a day after my birthday. I got it for my birthday. And, I was an adult, but I got it. I was still a very young adult. And so I was still real big into gaming. The graphic leap from where we had been to that was probably the biggest graphical leap just overall in the last, I don't know, last 35, 40 years of gaming. The VMUs, the little memory cards that had the screens on them, I thought that was ingenious to do. I remember how if you played somebody in NFL 2K, you could call your plays on the VMU. So therefore, it didn't show up on the screen. So if you was playing somebody that was sitting next to you and they was watching what formations or whatever you were picking, they couldn't see it because you were picking your plays off the VMU. So I think there was some really dope stuff that they had from a technological standpoint. But I think that the failure to evolve past the original design was where Dreamcast really started to hit some snags. And because of that, I think that is where they got big boyed, Sony and Microsoft saw the deal and they came in and they sort of muscled them out of the spot. But there were some great games. So there, the 2K franchises launched there. There was a fighting game called Power Stone. There was a really dope game. There was a lot of cool stuff for Dreamcast. I think a lot of us who were alive and young and old enough to experience it remember the system fondly. I sometimes wish that Sega would reboot the Dreamcast with some of the same sort of ideas that they did then. Who knows? I did hear something about Sega trying to get back into gaming. So we'll see how many legs that has. But yeah, I definitely have mostly fond memories of a Dreamcast.
I see PlayStation with the handheld game, the PlayStation 5 handheld, and it takes me back to Game Gear.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember Game Gear? Did you have one?
I did. I did not have a Game Gear. I do remember them. I'm a weird gamer, Brandon. I never liked handheld games. I've always been, I don't know, I guess I'm too American. I want the screen big. I want it on the wall. I want to see it all. Like gaming like this has never been. I didn't even like Game Boy. back like Nintendo Game Boy. I always want the big screen. I like the handheld PlayStation because of what it allows you to do. But I still, for handheld systems, to me, there's always this limitation that just cramps my own personal gaming style. But I know that the younger generation, the way they game, I mean, they stay on the phones anyway. The screens are smaller than that anyway. So that's not going to be a thing for them. So for the market that it's targeted for, I think it has a chance to be fantastic.
He talked wrestling nostalgia. He talked WWE. He talked NBA Live, NBA 2K, and everything in between. Brother, you're a wealth of knowledge. Talk Sega Dreamcast as well. Thank you so much for your time. You are off the hot seat.
I appreciate you, bro. Have a
My
good
man.
one.
Yes, sir.